It was a rare, hot sunny day that we occasionally get in the Scottish summer. My girlfriend and I had decided to make the most of it by going for a walk in the beautiful East Lothian countryside. We had been reading about an old castle ruins hidden within the grounds of a grand country estate, Yester Castle. It was said to date back to the 15th century and was shrouded in mystery and legend, with only a few very brief mentions in history books. One of the most captivating tales about the castle was about a man called Hugo de Gifford, also known as the Wizard of Yester, who was rumoured to have lived in the castle. He was said to have conducted bizarre and arcane rituals in the basement vault of the castle, wrought by witchcraft in a pact with the devil. This mysterious basement chamber had become known as Goblin Hall, and had even led to a pub being named after it, which is still there today in the nearest small village. The more we learned, the more excited we were to explore this enigmatic place. The real challenge for us, however, was that Yester Castle wasn't actually open to the public, and there was very limited information on how to find it. We decided to try our luck, figuring that even if we didn't discover the castle, we'd at least have a pleasant walk in the picturesque countryside. We arrived at the gates of Yester House, which served as the entrance to the estate. It was a bit sketchy, considering it was essentially someone's house, but we couldn't resist the allure of the castle ruins, so we discreetly passed the grand mansion and ventured into the woods that surrounded the estate, hoping to spot the ruins fairly easily. The woods turned out to be denser than we had expected. We walked for hours, talking about the castle and all the creepy details we'd managed to gather, but after a while, we realised we were hopelessly lost. The thick summer canopy overhead made it difficult to get our bearings, and darkness would soon fall. There was no chance of finding the castle this way, and our only option was to retrace our steps and find our way back to the car. When we finally arrived back at the estate's entrance, we were pretty disappointed. We pulled out a road map from the glove compartment and studied it. My girlfriend thought she spotted another route that might be worth a look, so we decided to give it one last shot. We drove a couple of miles in a loop to the back of the woods, where we found a farm that backed onto Yester Estate. We parked our car on the side of the road, hopped over the farm gate, and ventured back into the woods. Within minutes, we looked up and saw a stone wall rising out of the trees. Our eyes met, and we knew that we had found it. We rushed towards it, pushing through the dense woodland, jumping over a couple of small streams nearby. And there it was, the castle ruins, lying dormant amongst the trees. While the outer walls lay broken and scattered, the massive stone walls of the castle still stood tall. There was definitely an instant creepy atmosphere, just being alone in the woods, standing amongst ruins that were hundreds of years old. There was a lot more of the building still standing than I expected, and as we walked round, we spotted a set of smooth stone steps, partially hidden by leaves and overgrowth. We walked down and were met with two stone archways with iron bars blocking them off. Sunbeams cut through the arches and lit up the eerie interior, revealing what had to be the mysterious basement vault. Unable to gain access through the archways, we scrambled round, looking for another entrance in the overgrown terrain. A few minutes after, we spotted a small tunnel entrance. The opening was about 4 feet tall. Looking in, it was pitch black, and we couldn't see to the other end. But being where it was, it made sense that it was the entrance to the vault that we'd just been looking at. We ducked down and made our way into the tunnel, fear starting to blend with the excitement. After a few seconds in the dark, we emerged at the other end, the sun partly illuminating the vault through the archways that we'd been standing at. The atmosphere inside was creepy, damp, and echoey. It was so quiet, just the sounds of birds and the rushing water from the streams outside. There was an amazing arched ceiling, still in amazing condition from the 1400s, and a strange but intricately made stone altar on the wall. Looking around in total amazement, we noticed a small steep staircase in the corner, with primitive stone steps leading downward. This was the very place where the castle's eccentric owner was rumoured to have communicated with demons and devils. However, legend had it that the staircase had been sealed off. We hunched over and descended carefully, taking it slowly on the slippery steps. If something happened down there, it clearly wasn't the easiest place to find, so we tried to be as cautious as we could. As we reached the bottom, we found what we expected: a complete blockage with large boulders and a small pool of water. We laughed nervously at the anticlimax and decided to head back up the stairs and out into the chamber. As we turned to leave, we heard something. It was the unmistakable sound of rocks hitting together and a dragging noise coming from the passage behind us. We both bolted up the remaining stairs, through the chamber, and into the narrow tunnel that led out to the woods. My girlfriend grabbed my hand, and we ran back out into the open, where the tension slowly eased. We knew there was nobody else in there with us, and the tunnel was well and truly sealed. We were both laughing anxiously, but equally confused, swearing that we had both heard the same thing. We slowly walked back to the car through the farm, the sun setting in the distance. We even spotted a few bats overhead, which added to the eerie charm of our trip. That day's adventures in the woods of East Lothian has stayed etched in our minds, and even though it was terrifying for a moment, it remains one of my most cherished memories. It was a bone-chilling winter evening, and the sky was already dark and heavy. I had made this walk up the Cheviot Hills in Northumberland with my Alsatian Tala countless times. She loved the long walks, and I loved the solace of the frosty, quiet fields and woods. On this particular day, though, the wind was picking up, and the winter bite felt more severe. About 40 minutes into our walk, Tala suddenly sat down and barked, a harsh, insistent sound that cut through the chilly air. She whined and refused to move forward. This behaviour was unusual for her. She usually bounded around, unfazed by the cold. I tugged gently on her leash, trying to coax her along, but she wouldn't budge. Perplexed, I decided to turn back toward home. Whatever had unsettled her, I didn't want to push it. As we walked back in the dim light, I glanced around, admiring the woods and the fields and the amazing clear skies. But tonight the landscape that was so familiar began to tug at my senses in the encroaching darkness. I couldn't shake a sense of unease that hung in the crisp air. I don't know if I was just a bit thrown off by Tala acting weird, but as we approached the farm road, my anxiety mounted. Just then, I heard the distant hum of a car engine, gradually growing louder as it approached. I quickly stepped to the side of the road with Tala, who was beginning to growl and whine, as if she could sense the tension with me. The sound of the engine peaked as an old Range Rover drove past, moving at a crawl with 3 men inside. Tala's barking intensified as the car came to a halt about 10 meters ahead of us, its engine still running and headlights piercing the night. A wave of urgency came over me, and I instinctively wrapped the leash tightly around my hand. I couldn't see inside the car from my vantage point, and the men inside didn't make any move to exit the vehicle. They just sat there, an eerie, threatening presence in the dimly lit road. Time seemed to stretch, the cold winter air biting at my skin. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, the Range Rover revved its engine and slowly drove off into the darkening night. The low rumble of the engine faded into the distance as I continued to watch it, feeling a sense of relief mixed with uncertainty. I did manage to get a glimpse of the license plate and committed it to memory as it disappeared from sight. Tala seemed to relax as we walked home, but I couldn't stop myself wondering what the conversation in that vehicle had been, as it idled in front of us at the roadside. The next day, I couldn't shake the strange encounter from my mind. I decided to mention it to one of my neighbours, who happened to be the police chief constable, and it seemed he thought it was odd as well. 2 days later, I received a phone call from my neighbour, the police constable. They had discovered a shallow grave in the area that I described to them, and they were asking for a description of the men and the vehicle I'd seen. I shared all the information I could, but in the end, nobody was ever apprehended, and the information my neighbour was willing to share was limited. The licence plates on the Range Rover turned out to be fake, and the body in the shallow grave couldn't be identified. I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for Tala's strange behaviour that night. Her instincts had alerted me to something amiss, and it made me wonder what might have unfolded if we'd walked further down that dark road. My 2 roommates and I were out for an adventure in my recently purchased second-hand RV. We're all from just outside Casa Grande, Arizona, and we were stoked to escape the usual grind and soak in the views, breathe in the fresh air, and simply be out in the country. It was still fairly early in the afternoon, and we were scouting for the perfect spot to park and chill for the evening. As we drove through the desert landscape, the sun rained down, showering the rocky landscape with a glowing light. We spotted a promising spot near the edge of a wilderness road that offered a stunning view. The decision was quick. This was where we would set up camp. The RV came to a halt, and we wasted no time unloading our gear. We set up chairs outside, and the first beer was cracked open. Life was good, and we were determined to enjoy it. About an hour into our campsite bliss, we noticed a man approaching from the nearby road that we had pulled in from. He seemed to have come out of nowhere, and as he neared us, he simply continued walking right towards our camp. My roommate Tom gave him a friendly wave, but there was no wave back, just a direct, unbroken stride our way. "Hey there," Tom called out to the stranger. "Nice evening." The man just looked at Tom for a second and then grumbled, "How long are you going to be here for?" We exchanged awkward looks, wondering why he was so concerned about our stay. Tom, trying to ease the tension, offered the man a beer, but the man didn't say a word. He just turned his back to us and began unpacking his backpack to set up his tent, right next to the RV. "You're just going to camp here?" My other roommate, Hannah, asked the man incredulously, gesturing at the vast expanse of open desert that stretched for miles around us. The man's response was just another grunt. "It's a free country, isn't it?" A hostile atmosphere hung heavily in the air, extinguishing our relaxed mood in an instant. We quickly packed up our belongings and decided to drive a bit further to find another, hopefully more peaceful spot. We drove for a good 10 miles and discovered a beautiful location, dotted with cacti, offering a breathtaking view of the barren hills. We set up once more, lit a small campfire, and watched as the night sky painted itself with a tapestry of stars. From time to time, we heard sounds in the distance, bouncing off the rocks, but we put it down to the expected nature of the rural area that we were in. As the evening wore on, we let the campfire dwindle and decided to turn in for the night, retiring to the cozy beds within the RV. We locked the door and turned out the light. Sometime in the middle of the night, I awoke to the hushed whispers of Tom and Hannah in the beds below my mezzanine bunk. I asked them what was wrong. Their voices quivered as they explained that they had heard someone walking around outside for the past few minutes. Before I could react, we heard the door handle being tugged at and rattled as if someone were trying to force their way in. My friend jumped up and grabbed an empty beer bottle. "Who the hell is it?" he shouted. taking a defensive stance by the door. Silence followed. The pulling and rattling stopped abruptly. After a few tense seconds, my friend decided to open the door cautiously, shining a flashlight into the night, the beer bottle gripped in his raised arm. There was no one there, just the moonlit desert landscape, serene and silent, as if the unwelcome presence had disappeared into thin air. The tension became nauseating, and we decided to leave, all agreeing that it was surely the weird old guy from earlier, and had somehow, and for some reason, tracked us back down. Whatever the reason, we were no longer in the mood to brave the uncertainties of the night. As we scrambled to get ourselves ready to leave, we heard a sudden gunshot echo through the desert. I felt my heart jolt hard as I jumped into the driver's seat, turned the keys and sped off, gravel crunching beneath the tires, Tom and Hannah struggling to hold on. As we turned, I felt something bang the side of the RV, but I couldn't see anything in the mirror amidst the chaos. I called the police as soon as we got back home, explaining about the man we had encountered, but also anxious that I might have struck him during our escape. Still, no word from the police followed, and our questions were left unanswered. The experience hasn't deterred me from taking more road trips in the RV, but it definitely left its mark. There's something truly special about being out in the countryside, but the peacefulness and isolation can come with its own set of unpredictable dangers.